Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hi, I'm Barbara, talk about books, and today the book we're going to be talking about is Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. I am bringing you a spoiler-free review. Well, yeah, spoiler-free. I mean, I am going to spoil the original myth that this is based on because this is a mythological retelling of the story of the Minotaur, but I mean, if this story has managed to elude you for all of the time that it's existed, it's time for you to be spoiled. I'm sorry. But the actual retelling itself, what Jennifer Saint as a writer, as a reteller brings to the table, that is not going to be spoiled. It's just going to be reviewed and picked apart. So if you're not familiar with the story of the Minotaur, it's very simple really. And very weird, as Greek mythology tends to be. Basically, very long story short, after a conflict between Athens and Crete that ends rather badly, Athens has to send a certain number of Athenian tributes to the island of Crete to be devoured by the Minotaur. What is the Minotaur, you ask? It is a creature that is half man, half cow, that was born because Pasiphae fucked a bull. Don't ask me how that works. I would not know. Again, this is Greek mythology. This carries on for ages. Minos, Pasiphae, Ariadne, and Phaedra are the royal family, and they have to watch this go down all the time, and the only one really enjoying it is King Minos. Till one day Theseus arrives, which is a name that you might have heard of, and he pretends to volunteer as tribute to kind of sacrifice himself, but instead he has a plan to put an end to this terrible tradition. He arrives, Ariadne falls madly in love with him and basically sacrifices her entire life to help him. Though of course, now that she's helped Theseus kill this Minotaur and flee with all the other Athenians, she has to fucking leg it. Are you kidding? She's Princess of Crete, like she has to go. So she goes with Theseus, believing that they're headed back to Athens, except that while he is headed back to Athens, she is abandoned on a desert island. That's basically the very basic premise of the story that this book is based on. So now that I've told you kind of what this book is about, let's get into my opinion that literally nobody asked for. I'm gonna start by saying that I am always very skeptical of retellings. I'm trying to think of a retelling that I read that wasn't shit, and this is the only one that comes to mind, and it was okay. Retellings just tend to be terrible in my experience. However, it did have a very interesting selling point, which was that it is a feminist mythological retelling, that it brings emphasis to the voices of women in ancient Greece, and ancient Greece has very interesting women in it. So this was going to be either one of two things. It was either going to be a pile of garbage because it's just a writer who decided to capitalize off this wave of woke culture and feminism, or it was going to be very powerful, hard-hitting, and insightful. And luckily, it was. That's not my complaint about this book. I genuinely believe that Jennifer Saint had some very interesting things to say, and it was a fantastic book in many ways. However, some of the things in this book have just annoyed me, and I don't know how to say this any other way. I think it perfectly describes my feelings at some of what I was reading. I would go through pages of beautiful lyrical prose and then read something so absolutely ridiculous. So in this video, I'll try and give both praise and criticism because there isn't really anything in between. This was just hit or miss for me the entire time. And you know, since I have taken on the monstrous task of writing a novel, and I know how difficult it is, I have at once become much more critical of what I read, but also much more understanding. Because you know, la critique est facile, mais l'art est difficile, hein, n'est-ce pas? Anyway, so I will try and be as respectful as I can, but I'm not going to hold back either, because parts of this book were so irritating that they shaved a few years off my life. First, I think I need to congratulate Jennifer Saint on writing such a compelling and enjoyable story. It's such a fun retelling, yet staying so faithful to the original. Even as someone who is very familiar with the myth and has read a lot about it, I learned things from this book. There are things that I didn't know that I then looked up, turned out to be true. You can absolutely learn from this, which makes sense because I think that Jennifer Saint is a classicist, but still, it's not something that I was expecting. I didn't expect to, you know, get all this additional knowledge, and that is a wonderful thing because it's sometimes quite difficult to be so faithful to an original story, yet also bring something new and entertaining to the table. So the fact that she managed to find this right balance was very impressive. The characters are incredibly complex and layered, especially Phaedra. Phaedra is very complex and layered, and her character arc just blew my mind. Ariadne a little bit less. I think that Jennifer Saint was probably a little bit too afraid to take too many risks with Ariadne, but I'll get into that in a minute. Characters were very well developed. I loved that we got to see Theseus for the piece of shit that he actually is, because he tends to be kind of glorified when really he's an asshole. And the structure was great. The structure was wonderful. This story has a lot of lulls in it, a lot of times where it gets kind of boring, a lot of the time that Ariadne is stuck on this island, nothing really happens, and just when it gets boring we switch to her sister Phaedra's point of view, and we get these alternate perspectives, and we in turn become this all-knowing reader, and we kind of get to observe their trains of thought and their speculations and kind of be like, haha, but I know that you're wrong, or be like, ooh, but you're onto something here. It's very fun being this all-knowing reader in a world where you follow people who don't know everything that is going on. Phaedra's character arc, Phaedra being Ariadne's sister, was by far my favorite aspect of this book. I was very interested to see how Saint would handle her character arc, because Phaedra is always seen as a villain in mythology. She is always portrayed as someone with very questionable morals, and because she was presented as such a likable character in the beginning, I wasn't quite sure as to what she would do with Phaedra. Would she justify her actions? Would she modify them? Would she kind of take an entirely different course? And in the end, I was so satisfied with what she had done, because Jennifer Saint really took every moment of Phaedra's life, every small or big or influential moment, wove it in with emotion and rationality. And when you get this big finale, this big end of Phaedra, it happens and you're not really left wondering how you got there. It makes perfect sense, and honestly I think that Phaedra's character arc is a work of genius. I loved it. However, I cannot say the same about Ariadne. While I love that Jennifer Saint's novel doesn't allow us to pity Ariadne, she is not painted as a victim, and she is presented as this powerful woman, which is great. I found her really fucking dull and boring, and I feel like Jennifer Saint really didn't want to take any risks with the character of Ariadne, because she is the main character and she has to be likable to the reader, and she cannot be polarizing, and she has to be this kind of smooth cookie cutter main character. Because if you remove the names, the context, and you describe Ariadne to me, I couldn't place her, because she doesn't have a unique personality at all. She's bland and boring, and she could be in 1,000 different books. However, if you described Phaedra's personality to me, I would immediately think, oh, of course it's Phaedra. And I'm not just talking about major events, right? I'm talking about the way the characters think, the way they express themselves, their views on life. I just feel like she made this mistake being a debut author, where she really wanted the audience to like and connect with Ariadne, but as a result she kind of made her bland and forgettable. There are just so many women written in the same voice and character style that she doesn't stand out, she's not unique, and I think that Ariadne would have needed to have a very specific and unique voice, given the myth that she has originated in. I really wish we had gotten deeper insight into her psychology, her trauma, and by this I don't mean just a shallow reference in passing to the past trauma she has experienced, because that's really what it is. I feel like Jennifer Saint tries to show lasting impact by inserting passing, fleeting references to the trauma that she has experienced, but she doesn't delve very deep into the psychological impact. You have the moment where it happens, which is terrible, and the descriptions of confusion and loss and sadness are very vivid and very well made, but there is barely any aftermath. Just passing references of, oh yeah, it's just like when Theseus did this, it's just like when my mother says this, and then you just move on and nothing goes wrong at all. And that's not something that worked for me. I enjoy writers who really excavate the minds of their characters, who truly dig as deep as they possibly can. I'm a little bit annoyed because I know that Jennifer Saint could have done a very good job of this, and yet she didn't, which is why I'm a little bit frustrated. This could be the title of the video, by the way. Anything that frustrates me is because I know that this could have been fixed, because she is a very talented writer. So the fact that it wasn't really annoys me. I don't just want Ariadne to question the integrity of those who hurt her. I want her to question herself, to feel the guilt, to feel all these terrible emotions that are irrational but almost always associated with trauma. I want her to wonder if she should have seen it coming, if she could have done something better, if she can still do something now, if it is her fault that all of this has happened for more than 2 pages. I I want her to go through the self-destructive yet mandatory lapses of self-doubt and self-loathing before eventually slowly coming to the conclusion that what has happened to her is not her fault. And there wasn't enough of that. There was a little bit of that, and what there was of it was extremely good, but just not enough. Also, there was such a massive missed opportunity in this book that frustrates me to no end, and that is the inclusion of the character of Medea. And I don't mean her appearing there as an actual character, but she is briefly mentioned at the end of a chapter. For those of you who are not aware, Medea is Ariadne's cousin and follows a very similar story arc to Ariadne, except that, you know, instead of healing and then upgrading from a hero to a literal fucking god, Medea goes ahead and kills her ex's new bride, her father, and her 2 kids. So, you know, it couldn't really have gone worse. And when Medea is brought up, she is described as, you know, this stain on her family's reputation. Why didn't Jennifer Saint have a section where Ariadne finally truly understands Medea, enters a state of moral ambiguity where she finds compassion for her cousin Medea, instead of just complaining about Medea and seeing her as, you know, this source of shame, which she does for most of her family. I mean, I'm very biased because Medea's story is my favorite in all of Greek mythology, but my point is that would have added so much nuance to Ariadne's character. And the fact that Ariadne has such motherly instincts and that Medea doesn't could have been such an interesting parallel to bring up. And I think that there was such a missed opportunity. Medea just brings depth to characters. I would know because I have included the story of Medea in my own writing. So maybe I'm very biased. I'm totally biased. Another problem I had with this book is why is Theseus so likable? Because those of you who have read this book, you're probably typing right now, wait, Barbara, what do you mean he's so unlikable? He is literally the villain of the story. So you must be a little bit confused, but trust me, in the actual mythology, he is so much worse. Like, he is so much worse. And you can check out Plutarch if you are interested in seeing, you know, him being described as a million times more vile than in Ariadne. And I feel like this is another case of Jennifer Saint not really taking risks, where she still offers this new and unconventional depiction of Theseus that is much more damning than what we would generally have, but she could have gone a lot harder on him for sure. So now that I'm done talking about the characters, let's actually talk about the writing, which is what I think I have the most to say about. You know, this is very strange because the writing was either so beautiful that it made me want to tear up, or it just was so dreadful, so amateur that I felt like splitting my own skull open. And it's even more frustrating to have this mix of these two polar opposites, because on the one hand, I see what Jennifer Saint is capable of. I can see that she is a writer with a hell of a lot of potential, who is very talented, and then she gives in to just bad writing at some points, which is a very strange thing to see. I think that this just has a lot to do with her being a debut novelist, to be honest. I think that my biggest problem with her writing is that it has literally included every overdone writing trope to ever exist, which I did not think was possible. There is also like this aspect of just mind-numbing repetition, which I'm gonna get into. So while I was reading this, I have a folder in my notes app where I have the things that made me lose my mind just a little bit. So we have the tyrant who wears fear like armor. Overdone descriptions of the love interest's eyes. Have we ever seen that one before? The eyes that are as green as the murky depths of the sea, and they are just overdone constantly. I hate that. I hate it so much. There are some comically bad attempts at foreshadowing, to be honest. And the infamous, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. And also the repetition, as I mentioned, my god. Made me lose my mind. Made me lose my goddamn mind. In the first chapter or two, I don't think that you can go through a single page without Ariadne reminding you of how much she likes to dance. And it's constantly, oh my god, I wish I could dance right now. I wish that I could dance my way back into this part of my life where everything is light and bright and sweet, good and pure in the world, you know, that kind of stuff. And I wish I could get back to my dancing floor. And yeah, bitch, we get it. You like to dance. You know, for the first couple of chapters, it's her only personality trait, and it is an interesting thing to add to a character, but god damn it, we got it the first 6 times. God, I need to calm down. Also, when it comes to repetition, when Dionysus was introduced, his character trait is laughter, and it was repeated again and again. Like, if right now I go read a book and I see the word mirth written one more time, I'm going to start crying. Because it was repeated so many times and it looked like it was not repeated on purpose. It looked like an accident. And I feel like I don't understand how the editor let that slip. I feel like this could have been fixed with better editing. Do you see my frustration? This is even more frustrating than reading a book that is purely bad and, you know, written by just a terrible writer, because I know that Jennifer Saint is a good writer. And these small mistakes just become so frustrating because I know how well she can. Anyway, another descriptor that Saint overuses all throughout the novel is the unidentifiable expression, which, you know what, use it once or twice, fine. You know, it's a useful descriptor, it's a good one. But it got to the point where it was just an easy cop-out solution when she didn't feel like describing in depth the expressions of her characters. It's the same thing with, you know, the infamous "I let out a breath, I didn't know that I was holding." It's actually a very clever way of explaining tension, this kind of feeling where you are stressed but you don't quite know it until this weight is lifted off your shoulders. But because it's so overused, as a reader, I am very sick of it, and I imagine that you are as well. And it's the same thing where, like, the unidentifiable expression, yes, it's a smart way of conveying these conflicting emotions, but also don't use it as a cop-out every time you're kind of stuck. But yeah, this is it for the rant part. This is it for the writing part. This is it for the review, really. These are my thoughts. I genuinely think that Jennifer Saint is a wonderful writer. She is a great storyteller, and all I want is for her to have better editing for her next book, because all of the issues that I had with her writing were so small and insignificant on their own, but because they all piled up, it really did taint the reading experience for me. And also I need to keep in mind that it is a debut novel, so I will definitely give her next book another try. I think it's coming out in April. It's called Electra. If you feel like sending it to me for review, feel free. Jennifer Saint, if you're here. I know that I got very agitated within this review, but you know, it's not because I think that Jennifer Saint is a bad writer. It's because I think that Jennifer Saint is a great writer who fell into the trap of easy bad writing. Does that make sense? I can see that she's capable of so much, yet I feel like we didn't explore the full potential of the author in this book. But that being said, I would recommend it. It's still the best retelling that I have ever read. There are more positives than negatives. I would love to read her next book and see if she does better in a second book, possibly with a different editor. But yeah, that's about it. That is it. Thank you for watching. Guys, I don't know why I feel like I'm ending this so abruptly. You know what? I would really like it if you liked and commented on this video, so I feel less like I'm screaming at a blank void. Being a small YouTuber oftentimes really does feel like you're talking to just a brick wall. So if you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. If you're not subscribed yet, you should subscribe, because a lot of the people who watch my videos don't actually subscribe, which is a little bit annoying. And you can follow me on Instagram. I post there occasionally, so, you know, and add me on Goodreads to keep up with what I'm reading. I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.